Okay. Welcome back to Wednesday Gentle Yoga. And we don't always follow every week. I kind of teach based off of a theme or a concept or a topic, and I don't always follow that with this class, but today I am going to. So we're going to focus a lot on our hips today. And just like the spine, the hips have 6 actions as well, which are the very same actions. We're going to apply them to the hips now. And we're going to do 3 sets of the 6 actions. The first being seated, the second being standing with the chair, and then the third being standing with the chair, just differently. And so just let me know if you have any. You can always press your waving button on Zoom, or actually wave at me. I'll try to notice. But if you have any issues with anything, let me know, and I'm sure the class would like to hear about it too. So never feel afraid to ask questions. The hips can be tricky and tight for a lot of us. So, all right, we're going to start. Just take a moment to sit away from the back of the chair. You won't need a lot for today. We're just mostly going to use just the chair. So that's pretty much it. So sitting away from the back of the chair, find your sitting bones, move the flesh out from underneath them if you want to feel a little bit of a stronger connection through the sitting bones. See if you can also sense your tailbone. Just kind of let it release down. And then slide your hands closer to your groin so that you can move your shoulders back, adjust your head as well. If you sense your face is kind of leaning forward, move your head slightly back, and then close your eyes and point your gaze down toward your cheeks. And just start to tune into your breathing without trying to change your breath, just noticing the ebb and flow of the breath. Noticing if there's any abdominal tension, gently releasing that tension if you're able to. And just start to notice any qualities about your breath. Maybe the rhythm, the ratio of the inhale to the exhale. Maybe visualizing the pathway the breath takes as it enters and leaves the body. Notice if there's any pausing at the top or the bottom of the breath. Temperature, maybe sound. Also noticing if your breath is a satisfying breath or if it feels a little shallow or maybe trapped somewhere, like it's not able to fully move into certain parts of your body. Just kind of gathering information. And let's just take a nice slow inhale for 4 counts. And then see if you can exhale for 6 counts. Just dropping into that exhale a bit deeper. Maybe separate this breathing exercise with a couple easy breaths here. And when you're ready, just do 2 more of those 4-6 ratio breaths. You can always change the ratio if it's not working for you. Just try to have a longer exhalation. And anytime we work with breathing, we're really most interested in smoothness and steadiness. Finding your way back to an easy, automatic breath rhythm. When you're ready, let your eyes blink open. And welcome, everybody. We're going to start just by waking up the spine before we get into the hips. So we are going to go through the 6 actions with one kind of simple technique, which is called a Kriya, which is considered a cleansing technique. So what you're going to do is you might separate your knees a little bit, your feet a little bit. We're going to be circling over the sitting bones. So just make sure you feel those sitting bones on your chair and just start to kind of move into the perimeter, around the perimeter of the sitting bones. And as you do so, we're getting the flexion, extension, and lateral movement of the spine. What we're not getting just yet is twisting. We'll do that in a moment. But you're moving in one general direction here. We'll switch in a little bit. And as you come forward, there's your arching back. And as you move back, there's your rounded spine. And as you move to the side, you're getting that crescent moon shape to your spine. And as you, just like when you were breathing, really try to be more interested in smoothness and steadiness than speed or range of motion. Those two things don't matter as much as smoothness and steadiness. So sometimes you have to slow it down or make the movement pattern smaller to find smoothness and steadiness. So be just kind of noticing how easeful this is. You might feel like a machine that needs oil. That's okay. We're going to find a way to switch directions. So wherever you kind of land, just moving in the second direction now. And just do your best to really kind of exaggerate that back bend as you come forward, to kind of exaggerate the rounded spine. You might even tilt your chin down. And we'll do a few here. Just keep track of your sitting bones, how you're really moving over the full circumference of the sitting bones. Okay, so now you're going to wind your way back up to kind of a neutral upright position. And just so we get the twisting action, we're going to twist to our right here as fully as you can with your chest turning, and then try to keep yourself twisted and just start another Kriya, start another circular pattern as you kind of hold or maintain that twist. So we're incorporating kind of all of it now. You're going to just keep facing off to the right, keep turning your chest to the right. Kind of feels like a little bit of a orchestration to coordinate these things. Just do your best with it. And then you're going to wind your way back to center, turning yourself well to the left. Now come right up to your edge where you're kind of can't twist anymore position. And then start again with those circles. If you remember which direction you need to go in, that's great. Otherwise, just finding a direction. Keep facing off to the left to keep that twist. Encourage to continue. And it might be a little awkward, but just do your best with it. Just a nice lubricating movement for the spine. And you're going to do a couple more. And then when you are coming around the next time, you can just bring yourself back upright and out of the twist. Beautiful. All right, so we're going to go through our seated 6 actions of the hips here right now. So you can take as much of purchase on your chair as you need so you feel supported. We're going to come into resting chair child's pose, which is deep hip flexion. So you're going to come forward. If you feel like the gap between your stomach and your thighs is too large, you might fold your arms and just kind of tuck them in there so you have more support. Otherwise, you're going to connect your chest and the abdomen and thighs directly, and you'll let your arms dangle and your head dangle. And so in general, we get a lot of hip flexion just built into lifestyle from sitting in chairs and cars and walking forward and all those things. So we don't need as much hip flexion, but right now I'm calling this a full commitment hip flexion. We get a lot of partial hip flexion. So think about how really deeply massaging the femur head into the hip joint you are doing here. It's not your usual kind of mediocre hip flexion. It's really engaged and full commitment. So just take a few breaths, and throughout this practice, I'm welcoming you to just envision the top of the femur bone, which is the femur head, the ball and socket joint, and how you're positioned there in the pelvis with the femur head. into the hip joint and how the pelvis is positioned. It's really good to visualize your body and sharpen that proprioception as much as you can. Great. So after an exhale, you can inhale and just engage your core to help yourself up. We're going to do a hip flexor extender, which is going to be kind of a seated lunge. So I'm going to have you kind of angle your knees to the left and then do your best to get your right femur, your thigh bone, moving up and down, so as vertical as you can. And then curl the right toes under. And we've done this before, so you should recall it a little bit, hopefully. But your toes are tucked under, you're pressing your heel back, you're encouraging the direction of the kneecap to move down, so you're extending the front thigh. And that little gap, you can run your hand over where the thigh meets the groin here and the pelvis. We're trying to flatten that out as much as we can. So one more action that will help you do that is to take your pelvis and tip it back, which is kind of the action of when you're drinking out of a bowl or a cup. You're tipping the pelvis back and you're really trying to extend the hip flexor, which we don't get enough of. So do nice 3 breaths here. We need a lot more hip extension than most of us get. So just taking a moment to yawn that open. You might even use your hand to help spread that area, iron out that crease. And now go ahead and soften out of those efforts. We're just going to swivel off to the other side. And you're going to do your best to get your thigh bone moving up and down. Step your foot back. You might have to kind of arrange yourself on the chair uniquely. And then taking the toes under, really extend the heel back. Drive the kneecap toward the floor. Move the tailbone in, tip the pelvis back. Maybe take the hand, some reference of touch is always useful. And just encourage this hip flexor to extend. Breathe into it. Once you have a nice little opening in the body, give it some breath. You might work with the 4-6 breathing throughout this practice. Our exhalation is a real nice opportunity for the body to release tension. So lengthening it will give us a nice opportunity to let go of some of the tension we're carrying. And go ahead and start to soften out of that position, and you can just swivel back to facing forward. So we're going to come into now external hip rotation. This is the third action for the seated set. So we're going to do a seated version of bound angle pose, which normally you take the feet together, but that's a little awkward in this chair. So just take your toes to the floor, your heels together. And as soon as your toes are turning out, you can trust that you're in external hip rotation. So you want to drive the knees out. You're going to take your hands and just kind of press lightly on the inner knees. And what we don't want to feel when we're working with our hips is that things are showing up in the knees. So if your knees are kind of causing some agony, it's a sign to back off or modify or both, because our knees will generally take on what our hips are not going to. The hips are kind of stubborn parts of the body. And try to extend from the roots of your upper inner thighs out through the inner knees and continue on those lines. If you were just to kind of pull guy lines out of the kneecaps to whatever wall they would hit, just try to really bring strong line of energy that goes through the inner knees and beyond. One more thing I want to say here is when you start to work into this position, external rotation, I want you to think about the lateral space across your lower back. For a lot of us, it gets all scrunchled up. If you were to look at it, the flesh would be kind of wrinkled up or crepey. And so we don't want to really exploit that area of the body. So as you're doing external hip rotation here, draw the belly, the lower abdomen toward the lower back, and just imagine that it's supporting the back body, like it's scaffolding for that lumbar spine. So we're keeping the lumbar supported. Just a couple more breaths. Good. And then go ahead and release. We're going to counter this. You can keep your kind of feet where they are, but step them wider and bring your knees together. So So this is internal hip rotation. We all have, most of us have internal or external favoring in the body, and our hips are all anatomically different. So just notice which one is more challenging for you or more limited. It's just interesting to notice. Some people have really good internal rotation, and then their external rotations not as range of motion is not as great. So just noticing yourself, and keep pulling the knees together, pressing out through the outer heels, which is going to encourage the hips. And then I want you to think about how your femur head is in that ball and socket joint. Because the knees are moving in, those femur heads are actually pressing out. So it's just interesting to kind of sense how the body is mechanically working here. A couple more breaths. And go ahead and soften. You can kind of move the heels back together, step your feet back to the floor. And last but not least, we're gonna do moving away from midline, which is abduction, and moving through midline, which is adduction. If you've had a hip replacement, we try to avoid adduction because of the hardware, not liking it. So we're gonna step the right foot out to the side. And this is not external hip rotation because your toes stay forward. If we were to turn the toes out to the side, we would be rotating the hip. So make sure your toes are forward. We simply have the leg extended away from midline. So we're getting abduction. And then I just want you to really try to draw the skirting of the outer foot to the floor. What we don't want to do here is bust out or again, exploit that feeling of the outer ankle just pressing out. So find a way, imagine your way into sucking the outer ankle bone toward midline. Something goes out, something has to go in. We're always creating balance in the body. Couple deep breaths. Your femur head is now moving really toward midline as we take that leg away from midline. So it's always kind of working in harmony. Good. And now you're going to go ahead and switch it out. You might have to shift over on your chair, just kind of clear some space for the buttock or the thigh. The hip and ankle, I didn't say this on the other side, but they should be in the same line or on the same line. You're trying to put your hip and ankle in the same line. Toes are directly in front of the heel. We have to kind of work to grab the floor with the outer skirting of the foot. You should also try to protect the inner arch of your foot, not collapsing there. So grabbing the floor with the outer foot will help you restore the arch of the foot. Firm leg, sucking the outer ankle bone in. Give it some breath. Good. Wonderful. Go ahead and help yourself step back. And now finally we're going to do moving through midline. So we're going to take a seated version of our eagle pose. You might have remembered this pose. We've done it maybe once. I can't remember how many times, but it's a standing pose. It's a balancing pose. We're going to do it seated. So hopefully you have a way to cross your left leg over your right. If you need to modify, you can extend your legs so that you're not as, sometimes crossing the legs is difficult for people. So you can extend your legs so it's not too bent knees. And then you're going to try to squeeze your left shin to your right outer shin. And we're taking now this left leg through midline. We're in adduction, adduction. So squeeze there, squeeze your legs together. Now think about the femur head, it's pushing out, even though, because we brought the leg through midline. So it's always working in harmony. Couple breaths. Good. We're going to just unwrap our legs and switch the other side. So gently help your left leg down. That'll be the bottom leg now. Cross the right. And even if you can't get your lower legs to actually join, you're working them toward each other. So it's just the effort that counts. And you're squeezing, you're going to imagine that long head of the thigh bone, how it's relating into that hip joint. Give it some breath. Good. Now go ahead and start to unwrap the legs. And I just do a time check here. Okay, we're doing great. Let's stand up. And I need to fix my screen here. So now we're going to be working with stepping on the chair seat. So if you sense you're going to have a little bit of a precarious feeling, you might want to adjust yourself to be within reach of a wall so that you can safely do this set. If you're worried about balance and you don't have a wall, I'll try to, is anybody in that situation? Because I can teach kind of a modified approach. Well, wave at me if you get kind of, did someone wave? Okay. I saw a gesture, but okay. If I see anybody like help, then I will I'll show you a version without stepping on the chair. So we're going to come into a runner's stretch. This is going to be, again, the flexion of the hip. So you're going to step your right foot onto the chair seat. Good. And then you can extend the leg and put your toes right above your heel. So it's like you're taking your foot off the gas in the car, you're flexing the foot, which gives you a nice, strong, engaged leg. Now you're just going to angle forward. We're not doing a giant forward bend today. This is all about thinking about the hip. So we're not trying to do our deepest forward bend. So you don't even have to round your back. You can keep your chest forward, your eyes forward. And just imagine you're holding a little pencil in your hip crease. You're trying to really close that space and full commitment hip flexion, not our kind of passive halfway hip flexion, a deep one. And then you're going to inhale up and go ahead and help yourself step down. Okay, good. And then other side, you can step on the chair, extend the leg, try to put your toes above your heel. Good. You're squaring yourself to face that chair. And then with your leg fully engaged, your foot as fully flexed as you can, hinging forward. And we have to tip the pelvis forward to help us do that. Your pelvis. See if you can kind of imagine your femur head in that hip joint, always kind of thinking about how that would be showing up here. And again, just imagine you have to hold a little pencil in your left hip crease. And then you're going to help yourself inhale up and safely step down. Okay, so now we're going to do a lunge, which is stepping back up with the right foot. Okay, I knew I would forget this one. It's funny how you, as a teacher, when you're planning things, I was like, I'm going to forget that one. So this one's facing away from the chair. And you're going to take your left toes onto the chair. This is very similar to what we did just a few moments ago, seated in the chair. So we're trying to get the left thigh bone pointing straight down. Your toes are tucked under. You're extending your heel away from your body. And you're encouraging the kneecap toward the floor. And you're tilting the pelvis back to smooth out or iron out that hip flexor. We're putting it into extension. Tailbone moving into the body. You should maybe sense or imagine your thigh elongating. You might even run your finger over that space just to kind of get an idea for how much creasing there is, how much indentation. Breathe. See my leg. So we're taking that second side up. Toes are tucked. Extend the heel back. Energetically draw the kneecap toward the floor. Tilt the pelvis back to encourage the hip flexor extension. And breathe. Good. And now softening those efforts to help you come out of it, step down safely, slowly, do what you need to do to make sure you feel stable. You guys are looking great. And now we're going to be working with external rotation. We're going to do gate pose. So I'm going to have you step onto the chair with the right foot, but now you're facing 90 degrees from the chair. You're turned, yep. And we'll try to be on the same line with the heel and the hip, because that's really when the magic happens, the external rotation. Toes should be pointing out sideways. If they were pointing forward, we wouldn't be externally rotated. So take your hand inside the right knee, press back, try to roll the right buttock forward. And again, think of that idea, just like when you're sitting in the chair, of extending from the inner thigh out through the inner knee. Try not to shorten laterally across the lower back, so spread the abdomen. Every time you breathe in, think about the underside of an umbrella. Rather than poofing the belly forward, support the lumbar, spread the flesh laterally by drawing the abdomen toward the back body. And it's a gentle action. It's not a gripping, harsh action. It's just a soft action. Good. Okay, and then you're going to start to ease back out of it and step down. And then just move your chair aside to the other side. And we'll step onto that chair seat, attempting to align the heel with the hip. Good. And then pressing your hand to the inner left knee. So I just want to point something out here. We're doing external hip rotation on the left leg here, and the right standing leg hip is doing adduction, because we don't want to just poke out with that hip and kind of throw everything off all wonky. So you have to engage hip adduction on your standing leg. So sometimes some of these poses we're doing multiple hip actions at once. Breathe. Good. Think about the flesh of the lumbar and the sacrum and try to spread the abdomen back gently. Nice. And now go ahead and soften out of that, step down. Okay, so now internal rotation. We're going to step onto the chair with the right foot. Again, we're facing the chair. You're going to take your left hand and cross to the right. And take your right hand to your hip. Yep. And now you're going to twist. So you're helping yourself turn to the right. And just like I said in the previous pose, you want to, that standing leg, I want you to notice the outer hip and don't let it poke out, which it wants to do here. And just suck the outer left hip bone toward midline. Good. Wonderful. And now gently help yourself turn out of the twist. You can release the hold on your thigh or knee. You're going to step down and set up the other side. So this is a gentle internal hip rotation because we're pressurizing the outer knee. We're holding the knee in with the arm crossing the body. You can feel the knee wanting to go wide. And then think about your right hip bone and do the adduction action of moving that femur head toward midline. Keep revolving your chest. breathing well, and envision your left femur head pushing to the outer hip socket, which happens when we internally rotate the hip. Sorry about my throat. I have a little frog in my throat today. And then go ahead and softly release. Okay, good. We're getting through this. This chair sequence is a little bit tricky because we all have different heights to our chair and we don't all have walls. So I'm just glad we're all still seeing everybody upright. So I want you to step away from your chair enough that you're going to be able to step your right heel onto the chair with an extended leg. And because we've already done external rotation, what we're working on now is abduction, where we take the leg away from midline. You're going to turn your toes, spin on the heel and turn your toes forward so your toes are in front of your heel. That way we're not rotating in the hip, we're just moving out sideways. Okay, so this actual pose, we're doing 2 birds, 1 stone, because with this hip, you're moving away from midline. With the standing leg, you're pulling it toward midline. So we're getting both of those actions right now. Just hold your hips and see if you can envision both hips in their sockets, what they're doing in there. We're trying not to let left hip poke out, so we're moving it toward midline. We're adducting, and this side we are abducting. Breathing. You guys look really good. I hope my internet connection's okay. I saw a little message flash by that it was, everybody hearing me okay? Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, so now we're gonna, however you need to, come off the chair because we need to move to the other side. So safety first. And then position yourself away from the chair enough that you can prop your heel on the seat. Again, we're attempting to put heel and hip in the same line, but then get out of that hip rotation by turning your toes forward in front of the heel. Remember that action of drawing the outer foot down, lifting the inner arch. We're opening the outer ankle, but we're not busting or exploiting that by shooting out there. Try to draw in with the outer ankle bone. And I always throw all of these things out there. If you just get one of them, that's great. Don't feel like you have to orchestrate everything at once. Moving in toward midline with right hip bone, away from midline with left hip bone. Meanwhile, our torso is upright. One of my definitions of mastering poses is that we're able to kind of hold a global sense of the interior body at once. So if you can kind of manage all of these things, you're starting to really gain some mastery over your poses. I'm just taking a few more breaths here. And then you're gonna soften out any way you need to step down. All right, we're coming in on the 3rd set here, you guys. So the first thing we're gonna do is hip flexion again. So we are going to use the chair seat for our hand support. We're done stepping on it. So these are going to feel hopefully more stable than the last set. We're going to come into the intense side stretching pose, Parago Tanasana. Right foot is going to be forward, left foot is going to be back. Your hips are hip distance wide, even though they're not under your hips, so don't be on a balance beam. Have some distance so that you can swivel your hips to square evenly toward your chair. So you're holding onto the chair, the edges with your hands, they should be right under your shoulders. And we're focusing on deep, full commitment, hip flexion here. Right hip is getting to go first. Plunging the femur head into the hip socket. Again, this is not the day to do your deepest forward bend. So just keeping your back lumbar concave or flat is fine. You don't have to round your spine. Try to keep your shoulders and hips really squared up to the chair. Your neck can be neutral, looking just straight down at the chair seat. And just taking a few moments to encourage that plunging action. Just scrub your heel back. So scrub the heel without it actually moving. You're just kind of, I call it clamping. You can clamp your feet toward each other. Your feet won't actually move. And you should feel like you're taking that femur head up into that socket joint a little bit deeper. And go ahead and soften those efforts. I'm going to have you switch out your feet. Again, make sure you're not on a balance beam, and your back foot has about a 60 to 80 degree turnout. So it's not an Egyptian foot. That's what I call it when you have two 90-degree feet. We have to turn out a little bit. There's a feature on the femur head called the greater trochanter. We have to make room for. So a little bit of turning with the back foot toes will help you do that. And now we're going to bring our awareness to the deep hip flexion going on here, plunging that long thigh bone up into the hip joint. Scrub the floor with the heel pulling toward the back edge of the mat. Breathe. This is where you want to think about that potential to hold a little pencil in your hip crease. Good. 2 more breaths. Go ahead and inhale, and you can help yourself stand up. And we'll turn the chair around so we can use the higher back of the chair for hip flexor extension, which we're going to do warrior 1. There's many ways to do these actions. I just picked them today, but there's many poses that would help us accomplish these things. So right foot forward, left foot back, and you're going to use the chair for support for your hands. You're going to need to be away from the chair enough that you're going to be able to bend your right knee, so you don't want to be bonking into it. You might have to step back a little bit. The back leg is what we're targeting right now. We're getting hip flexion extension on the left leg here. So you want to have a knee bend with the right and a really perfectly straight left leg as best you can. And then take that pelvic tilt, tip it back, iron out that left hip flexor crease as best you can. Even if your left heel doesn't touch the floor, keep extending the heel toward the floor. And give it some breath. If you have low back issues, you can target the low back, of course, and oftentimes that can be useful, but also tight hip flexors can really be the cause of some low back stuff. So always remember these hip flexor extensions and help your body equalize, because like I said earlier, we do so much hip flexion, not enough extension. One more big breath here. Good, yeah, some of you taking the arms up if you feel like you're able to. And now you're gonna help yourself come out by straightening the front leg, moving some weight forward to switch the feet out, and stepping back with your right foot. So enough distance from the chair that you're able to really find a deeper knee bend. Ideally, one day, someday, you have a 90-degree thigh bone to shin bone relationship. Some teachers call it being in your square. And then you're going to really work with the back leg now. So compact the back leg from front to back, yawning open the back of the knee, yawning open the front hip flexor, tilting the pelvis back so that you're not pitching forward with the trunk. I don't see anybody doing that, so excellent job. You can free up the arms if you want to take them up. If you don't need that chair for support, feel free to extend the arms upright, but don't let the arms overhead pull you out of the depth from the waist down. So sometimes I see people's arms go up and it's like they're riding an elevator and the whole pose goes up. Stay deep in your pose, take the arms up, and there you have that harmonic balance in yoga that we're always trying to strike. And just 2 more breaths. And then if your arms went up, go ahead and find the chair again, straighten the left leg, and step your feet together. So let's just pause for a moment to get in a mountain pose. So you might use a chair behind you. I like to use a chair behind me just to bring my fingertips onto, which pulls my shoulders back. And then I like to align myself like that with the fingertips staying there till the very last moment. Everything kind of, I get into place, make sure the feet are aligning right. Second toes are directly in front of the heels. Pelvic tilt is neutral. So if it was flush to the top with liquid, it's not spilling out the front, it's not spilling out the back. You should feel pretty open hip flexors here. Your skull is over your spine, your chest is lifted and spread, and then release the hands. Hopefully you arrive with your thumbs adjacent to your hip bones. And maybe close the eyes. If you're struggling with balance, just soften the gaze and lower the gaze. And stepping into the feet, just softening your feet. We do tend to kind of cling a little bit with the feet initially. And just spreading the surface area of the feet. Front to back, side to side, lift the arches. Firming the muscles of the legs onto the bones. Taking your thighs from front to back, taking your buttocks forward. Your skull over the spine by lifting from the chin to the base of the skull, softening the jaw. Drop the shoulders. And imagine someone standing behind you, putting lots of pressure down on your shoulders. And if you're in the pose correctly, the pressure on the shoulders only reinforces the wise actions of this pose. It does not suppress the spine, it does not kill the upward energy, it only strengthens it. And try this at home with a partner at some point because it's pretty cool. It's a great way to test your alignment in this pose. Go ahead and let everything soften, release. You can shake your limbs out. We'll come out of that. Okay. So we'll put the chair in front of us. You may or may not need it. This is, again, just going to be for hand support, for balance. We're going to do our external hip rotation with Warrior 2. So we're going to be stepping wide. The chair is in front of us, higher, the back of the chair is facing you. And you're turning your right toes out 90 degrees so that we're moving from the root of the thigh, externally rotating in the hip joint. If you're gonna look at alignment, your right heel should directly line up with your left arch. Your left toes are turning in. So we're actually also getting internal hip rotation, but I don't think, I'm doing a whole nother pose for internal hip rotation, but just be aware that you are internally rotated on your left leg, externally rotated on the right. Okay, we're coming into Warrior 2, so you're gonna take that right knee above the ankle. This should feel a lot like gate pose, which we did earlier, stepping on the chair. And so remember that action of pressing the knee back. This time you don't get to touch it because you have to use your arms like this in this pose. But you want to keep awareness of the knee magnetizing toward the small toe side of the foot rather than where it wants to go, which is the big toe side of the foot. Roll the buttock under and remember that thing that happens when you're externally rotated across your lower back. If you imagine the skin, it's all crumpled up. Use your belly to support your lower back. Spread it back. Relax your shoulders. Turn and look over your right hand to complete the pose. Give your eyes a connection to the back of the head and bring some awareness to your left wrist as if someone was holding it and not letting you go anywhere. It gives you something to reach away from to feel more extended through the right fingertips. Okay, good. And now pushing down through the right foot to straighten the leg. You can take your hands down and pivot so that we can do the other side. So you're going to turn those toes in on the right leg and out 90 degrees on the left leg. You should still be in alignment, heel to arch, and then taking the knee over the ankle. Try to press the knee out to the back of your mat. Keeping your torso upright. When you're ready, you can extend the arms. Try not to grip in the shoulders. So soften the inner edges of your shoulder blades. Down your back. This will help your shoulders release down rather than munching on your ears. And you're going to look over the left hand, but in contrast to that, rotate, revolve your trunk from left to right so that you don't turn with the gaze, which gaze is very suggestive. We always let it drag us around when we're not as embodied. Keep pressing the knee back, spread the flesh of the abdomen back. See if you can sense your internal and external hip rotation on the respective sides. Let's do another breath. And then go ahead and straighten. Help your hands onto the chair, turn your feet, and go ahead and step the feet together. And get the chair back over to the right side, but we're gonna come back to mountain pose just to see if there's any kind of residuals from that. Just feet together or up to hip distance apart. You slip back into those wise actions pretty quickly because we were just here. The body has good muscle memory, cellular memory. And just observing the breath. You don't have to willfully do anything with the breath, just notice. Nice. Okay, so for internal hip rotation, even though we just touched upon it, we're going to do triangle pose, just a separate pose so we can really think about it. So we're going to have the right toes turning out 90 degrees. Same exact legs that you had for warrior 2, except we work with straight legs in this pose. Triangle pose, the space of the legs always represents a triangle, so it's an easy kind of way to remember that. So the heel to arch alignment. Ideally, one day you have your own legs worth of distance between your feet, which makes it an equilateral triangle. But for some of us, we have to keep it a little more narrow, which is fine. So bringing attention to this left hip, what it's doing in the hip socket, and then you're gonna put your right hand down on your chair, and it's right under your shoulder, and we're gonna take the left hand onto the left hip. So with this internal hip rotation, you can maybe imagine that femur head pushing to the outer hip socket. Keep turning your chest, not only into the middle space in front of you, but eventually starting to wind it gently up. And your eyes should be up too, because it's going to help your spine stay lighter than it wants to be. And just connect the dots in your mind's eye from your tailbone to the top of your head. This helps us make the spine consistent. Sometimes we forget about our whole head and it falls, and then we have a slumping crown. We want to keep the crown of the head really consistent with the tailbone so that you have kind of a full chain of the spine awareness. Keep strongly internally rotating, so you're kind of rubbing the foot, or scrubbing the foot, I should say, toward the big toe ball mound and toward the outer heel, okay? So you're encouraging the internal rotation. So scrubbing the foot toward the big toe ball mound and toward the outer heel. And yeah, some of you are taking the arm up, perfect. Go ahead if that's in the cards today. I'm not, we can talk about all these different aspects of our poses, and I'm trying to just kind of distill the class to the hips, but you know these poses, so take the arms up if and when you're ready. Go ahead and help yourself out of it. You can either turn toward the chair and touch down that way. You can come directly up if you're able to maintain length in your spine. I just want you to always be vigilant of your body, and how you come out of the poses should be safe. So triangle pose to the left. So your wider stance, your left toes 90 degrees, your right toes are turning in. That's going to be our focus, is turning inward, moving that hip internally inside the hip socket. You can just come right onto that chair seat with your hand, put it under your shoulder, right hand on the right hip. Good. And also noticing here, didn't say this on the other side, but be aware that your left leg is in nice external hip rotation. So another nice complementing pairing. And then try that little encouragement action, moving more weight to your right big toe ball mound and right outer heel to really take that rotation to a deeper place. Full commitment. And then maybe the arm comes up to just kind of complete that full expression of your pose. The breath. Nice. And then you're going to find your way out. Again, you can either turn toward the chair and touch down with your hand. You can inhale and lift yourself up if you can protect the length of the spine. And then you're going to set up for abduction. So we're going to use the chair in front of us. The seat of the chair is going to be our support for our arms or hands. We're going to be stepping wide still, so you can keep your wide feet. But now, because we don't want to rotate, toes are directly in front of heels. We're simply taking the femurs away from the midline. Okay, so we're going to come to the chair. Arms are going to be just right under the shoulders. You'll start here. I want you to just take the outer skirting of the feet and energetically draw it down. I want you to suck the outer ankle bones toward midline and find a way to support the inner arches of your feet, feeling a little more lifted. I had a teacher with a funny accent. She was Belgian. She said, have a little mouse house where your arches are. A mouse should be able to fit where your arches are, which for me, I don't think a mouse of that size, or any size I've ever seen, could fit there, but maybe a little shrew or something. The mouse house. And then you're gonna go deeper. So you're gonna rest your head or dangle the crown of your head. You might take your forearms down. The idea is to keep your weight bearing over your feet very balanced. Some of us tend to hang out on our heels. Some of us tend to cling on our toes. We're all different. Try to balance, and not only front to back, but think about balancing the sides of the feet as well. We don't wanna bulldoze the pinky toes. So if you feel like your pinky toe is getting crushed, take a moment to lift up your toes, spread them apart, place them back down, restoring the breadth of the ball mounds, the breadth of the toes. Deep breathing. Think about the femur head. What is it doing in there? It's pushing toward midline, even though we're working with away from midline action. Just a couple more breaths here. Extend those exhalations. You're going to start to come out. You might come back to your hands, use your stomach muscles, walk the heels in, toes in, heels in, toes in, until you can come up. And now the moving toward midline action we're going to accomplish with revolving triangle pose. Last pose. So we're facing the chair seat. Right foot's going to step under, left foot stepping back. Start with your hands on your chair seat. This is starting very much just like we started Tanasana. You're going to keep your left hand on the chair and take your right hand to your right hip. And I want everybody to notice when you're not engaging good action in your body, I want everybody to notice how we tend to poke out with the left hip. Okay, so moving your left hip toward midline, you're coming into adduction, and you have to keep doing that. Pull that hip to midline, keep rotating your chest to the right. Resisting that poking out tendency, it wants to pull away from midline. You're encouraging it back to midline. like a shepherd, guiding it back. Keep it coming back. Keep that action going. Eventually your shoulders will align one above the other. That's the point to send the arm up, not before. If you send it up before, we have a gravity issue. We tend to get really kind of ugly pose. So ugly feeling pose. So we want to only take the arm up once we have the vertical alignment. Good. I want you to think about both hips compacting toward midline, both hips. Squeeze them in, make them narrower. That's really the way to maximize this pose is hip compaction. Beautiful. Now go ahead and help yourself turn out of it. You're going to swap out your feet. Again, don't have the Egyptian back foot, have a little bit of turnout to allow for the greater trochanter to have some space. We're going to keep the right hand down, it's under the shoulder. Squeeze your hips both toward midline. Take your left hand on your left hip. And then you have 3 little points of contact. You have a tripod. Press into your feet, press into your hands. That's going to help you turn and make space enough to turn. In yoga, we call this rooting to rise. We root down to help us rise. Squeeze the hip bones together. Good. Now that femur head is massaging the outer hip socket. Wonderful. Arm goes up if and when you're ready. Last couple breaths. And on an in-breath, lengthen out of it and help yourself bring the feet under you and stand up only to sit down. So you're going to stand up just so that you can sit down. And then once you're sitting, use the back of the chair. Have your feet, heels underneath the knees, your toes forward. Shoulders sitting back, which means your hands might have to slide closer to your torso. Your skull is over the spine, eyes closed, jaw softens. Just surrender any tension from the facial skin, softening from the hairline all the way down, your cheeks down to the chin. Try to do away with any extraneous effort. You have to have some to be in a seated chair, but anything that's not needing to work here, just try to let it fall away. Let your feet softly meet the floor. The leg muscles separate from the bones. Soften the belly. Soften your gaze, your eyelids. The shoulders are gripping at all, just try to release the shoulders away from the ears. Let's just start to take some deeper breaths, just a few cycles, deeper inhale, extending the exhale a bit longer. Start to squeeze your toes, squeeze your fingers, maybe rotate your wrists and ankles. And then sit forward. And we'll take our hands just in front of the heart, sit up tall. And Use your thumbs to press up on the sternum. Imagine the flesh of the chest moving up over the shoulders and down the back. Let's take a deep breath in through the nose and let it go. From the place within me that I know to be divine, I honor that place within each of you. Namaste. Great. Great, well, I hope your hips are happy. Give me any feedback if you have some. You could email me or anything. And I have a list of people that want the class every week, but if you just from time to time want it, you have to email me. So if you want to be on the every week list also, you can let me know that. So, all right, take care, you guys.